The police cruiser pulling up to my heated garage at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday in January was not how I expected to start my day in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when I saw the flashing lights through my kitchen window. My name is Xavier Olsen, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Estates community for exactly 8 months. 8 months of dealing with the most absurd homeowner association I could have ever imagined existing in this country, but calling the cops on me for having a heated garage. That was a new low, even for them. I walked outside in my slippers and bathrobe, steam rising from my coffee mug in the negative 12-degree weather. Officer Martinez stepped out of his patrol car, looking absolutely miserable in the cold. His partner, Officer Chen, emerged from the passenger side, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Morning, officers," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "What seems to be the problem?" Officer Martinez pulled out a small notebook. "We received a complaint about energy waste from your property. The caller claimed you were running excessive heating in your garage while your neighbors are suffering from the cold." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yeah, I know how it sounds," Officer Chen said, stamping her feet to stay warm. "But we have to respond to all calls. Can you show us your garage?" I led them to my detached 2-car garage. The building was well insulated, and yes, I had installed radiant floor heating 6 months ago. I opened the door to reveal my workshop. I restored vintage motorcycles as a hobby, and the heated space was essential for working with paint, adhesives, and keeping metal parts from contracting in the extreme cold. "This is it," I said. "I work on motorcycles. The heating is necessary for the restoration work I do." Officer Martinez looked around, clearly impressed by the setup. "This is pretty nice. You do this professionally." "Just a hobby, but I take it seriously. I bought a 1972 Honda CB 750 at an estate sale 3 months ago, trying to get it road-ready for spring." Officer Chen was examining the thermostat on the wall. "What temperature do you keep it at?" 55 degrees. "Just warm enough to work comfortably with a jacket on and prevent damage to the parts and materials." "And you're paying your own utility bills, correct?" Officer Martinez asked. "Of course. Every penny comes out of my account." The officers exchanged glances. Officer Chen pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. The complaint at 847 Oak Ridge Drive appears to be unfounded. Property owner is heating his own private garage with his own money. No violations observed." A familiar shrill voice cut through the cold morning air. "Officers, did you see it? Did you see his wasteful heating?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Here we go." Brenda Kensington, the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, came marching down my driveway in her expensive winter coat and designer boots. She was 53 years old with an asymmetrical blonde bob that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Behind her trailed 2 other HOA board members, Patricia Morrison and Susan Wells, both looking equally bundled up and equally irritated. "Mrs. Kensington," Officer Martinez said with obvious weariness in his voice, "we've investigated the complaint. There's no crime being committed here." "No crime," Brenda's voice pitched higher. "He's running heat in his garage 24 hours a day while the rest of us are trying to conserve energy. It's irresponsible, it's wasteful, it's against community values. It's my garage and my electricity bill," I interjected. "Which, by the way, you have no legal right to dictate. The HOA covenant clearly states that all homeowners must maintain reasonable energy consumption practices." Brenda pulled out a thick binder from her oversized purse. The woman actually carried the HOA rules with her everywhere. Officer Chen held up her hand. "Madam, unless there's an actual municipal ordinance being violated, which there isn't. This is a civil matter between neighbors. We can't enforce HOA rules. But the energy waste, Patricia chimed in, her nose red from the cold. I'm paying for the energy I use, I said slowly, as if explaining to a child. My utility company has no problem with my consumption. I'm within all legal limits. There is no waste when I'm paying for every kilowatt hour. Susan spoke up, her voice trembling from either cold or anger. It's insensitive. Do you know how high our heating bills are this winter? And you're just throwing money away heating an empty garage. It's not empty. It's my workshop. I gestured to the open garage door. I work in there almost every evening after my day job. I'm a software engineer, and I work from home most days. The garage workshop is where I decompress. Brenda's face was turning an unflattering shade of red. The HOA board will be discussing this at our emergency meeting tonight. This kind of flagrant disregard for community standards cannot be tolerated. You do that, I said. Have a great meeting. Stay warm. Officer Martinez was already walking back to his patrol car. Folks, we're done here. Mr. Olsen, have a good day. Mrs. Kensington, please don't call 911 for HOA disputes. That's not what emergency services are for. As the police car pulled away, Brenda stood in my driveway, clutching her HOA binder like a shield. You'll be hearing from us, Xavier. The board will not let this stand. I sipped my now lukewarm coffee. I'm sure I will. Have you considered that if you're so cold you could just turn up your own thermostats instead of worrying about mine? That's not the point, she shrieked. Then what is the point, Brenda? She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Community solidarity. We should all be suffering together. Or, I suggested, nobody has to suffer at all. Revolutionary concept, I know. The three women turned and marched away, Brenda muttering angrily about entitled homeowners and the decline of community values. I finished my coffee standing in my garage doorway, looking at the partially disassembled motorcycle on my workbench. The chrome tank reflected the overhead LED lights, and I could already envision how beautiful it would look once restored. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor directly to my right, Marcus Johnson. Dude, did HOA seriously call the cops on your garage heat? I texted back. Yep. Tuesday morning entertainment. That's insane. Want to grab a beer later? I need to hear this story, definitely. I went back inside, showered, and settled into my home office for a day of coding. I worked for a tech startup based in Austin, Texas, but they let me work remotely from Minneapolis. The pay was excellent, which is how I could afford this house and my hobbies. The HOA was the only downside to an otherwise perfect living situation. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I saved my work and went to answer it. A young guy in his 20s stood there with a clipboard. Xavier Olsen, that's me. I'm here to perform a mandatory energy audit of your property. HOA request. I leaned against the doorframe. Do you have a warrant? He blinked. A warrant. This is my private property. You can't just audit my energy use without my permission or a legal warrant. But the HOA said, the HOA doesn't have the legal authority to conduct forced audits of my private property. Sorry, but you're going to have to leave. The kid looked confused. I'm just doing my job, man. They hired me to check out properties flagged for excessive energy use. Who's paying you, the HOA? And how many properties are you auditing today? Just yours. I smiled without humor. Interesting. Tell Brenda I said nice try, but no, have a good day. I closed the door before he could respond. This was getting ridiculous. I pulled up the HOA covenant documents on my computer and started reading through them carefully. I had reviewed them when I bought the house, but clearly, I needed to refresh my memory on what they could and couldn't enforce. After an hour of reading, I was confident in my position. Nowhere in the covenant did it specify anything about energy consumption levels, heating practices, or mandatory audits. There were rules about exterior modifications, noise levels, and lawn maintenance. But nothing about how I heated my garage. My phone rang. The caller ID showed the HOA office number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the voicemail notification popped up. I played it on speaker. Brenda's voice filled my office. "Xavier, this is Brenda Kensington from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. We need to discuss your energy practices immediately. The board is implementing new guidelines for responsible community living, and your garage heating situation will be one of the first issues addressed. Please call me back at your earliest convenience so we can resolve this matter before it becomes a more serious issue. Thank you." I deleted the voicemail and went back to work. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. "Hey man, you won't believe this," he said. "Try me. Today has been wild. Brenda is going door to door telling everyone about your heated garage. She's trying to get people riled up about it. She just left my house." "What did she say?" "She claimed you're running your garage at 75 degrees and that you're wasting enough energy to power 3 homes. She's saying your electricity bill must be thousands of dollars a month and that it's driving up neighborhood utility costs for everyone." I laughed. "None of that is true. My garage is at 55 degrees, and my electric bill last month was $230. That's completely normal for a Minnesota winter." I figured she was exaggerating, but she's really working people up. Mrs. Patterson down the street was practically foaming at the mouth about it. "Great, just great. The HOA meeting is at 7 tonight at the community center. You going?" "I wasn't planning on it." "You should probably go. Defend yourself. You know how these things work. If you're not there, they'll paint whatever picture they want." He had a point. "All right. I'll be there. I'll save you a seat. This is going to be entertaining." At 6:45, I bundled up and walked the 3 blocks to the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. It was a small building with a meeting room, kitchen, and rec area. The parking lot was surprisingly full for a Tuesday night. Apparently, the drama had drawn a crowd. Inside, about 40 people were already seated. The meeting room held maybe 60 chairs total. Marcus waved me over to 2 seats he had saved near the back. I recognized most of the faces from neighborhood events, but I didn't know many of them personally. Brenda sat at a table at the front with the other board members. Patricia and Susan were there, along with the treasurer, Donald Pierce, and the secretary, a younger woman named Rachel Turner, who always looked vaguely uncomfortable at these meetings. At exactly 7, Brenda banged a gavel on the table. "This emergency meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association is now called to order. Thank you all for coming on such short notice." "What's the emergency?" someone called out. Brenda's expression turned grave. "We have a serious situation involving energy waste and community responsibility. As many of you know, we're experiencing one of the coldest winters on record. Utility costs are through the roof. Many families in our community are struggling to keep their homes warm." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "And yet," Brenda continued, her voice rising, "we have a homeowner who is running a heated garage around the clock, not for storage of temperature-sensitive items, not for any practical purpose, but for a hobby." All eyes turned to me. I kept my expression neutral. Xavier Olsen has been heating his 2-car garage to excessive temperatures all winter long. When confronted this morning, he showed no remorse. He even had the audacity to tell board members that we should just turn up our own heat if we're cold. That wasn't exactly what I said, but I let it slide. An older man I didn't recognize stood up. How much energy is he wasting? Based on the size of his garage and the heating system he's installed, we estimate he's using an additional 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, Brenda said confidently. I couldn't stay quiet. That's completely false. Brenda's head snapped toward me. Excuse me, I stood up. You're making up numbers. You have no idea what my actual energy consumption is. And even if you did, it's none of your business. It is my business when it affects the entire community. Brenda shot back. How exactly does my personal utility bill affect anyone else? Patricia stood up. It sets a bad example. If everyone heated their garages, can you imagine the environmental impact? But everyone isn't heating their garages. I am, for a specific purpose. And I'm paying for it myself. Susan joined in. It's wasteful and unnecessary, says who? You don't get to decide what's necessary in my life. The room erupted into arguing voices. Some people seemed to agree with me. Others were clearly on Brenda's side. Marcus leaned over and whispered, "This is better than cable." Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! This is exactly why we need new guidelines. The current HOA covenant was written 15 years ago. It doesn't address modern concerns like energy conservation and environmental responsibility. So you want to change the rules to target me specifically? I asked. Not just you, but you're the most egregious example of the problem. What problem? I'm not violating any laws. I'm not violating the HOA covenant. I'm literally just living my life in my own house. Donald, the treasurer, cleared his throat. Xavier does raise a valid point. The current covenant doesn't restrict energy usage. We would need to amend it. Then let's amend it, Brenda declared. I move that we draft new guidelines restricting unnecessary heating of non-living spaces. I second that motion, Patricia said immediately. Rachel, the secretary, looked up from her laptop where she was taking notes. Any amendments to the covenant require a vote of all homeowners. We can't just implement them tonight. Brenda's jaw tightened. Fine. Then I move that we schedule a special vote for next month. That I can do, Rachel said. A woman near the front raised her hand. I'm sorry, but I don't understand the problem. If Xavier is paying his own bills, why do we care? Thank you, random neighbor. Brenda turned to her. Because it's about community values, Jennifer. It's about setting an example. It's about being responsible citizens. Jennifer apparently wasn't convinced. But my husband heats our shed where he does woodworking. Should he stop doing that too? That's different, Brenda said quickly. How? It just is. I couldn't help myself. It's different because Brenda hasn't decided to target your husband yet. That's out of line, Brenda snapped. Is it? You admitted I'm not breaking any rules. You're literally trying to create new rules to stop me from doing something that only affects me. Marcus stood up beside me. I have to agree with Xavier. This feels like overreach. The HOA is supposed to maintain common areas and enforce basic property standards, not police how people heat their buildings. Another neighbor stood. I heat my garage too, for my car. Keeps the engine from freezing. So do we, another person added. Brenda was losing control of the room. Those are practical uses. Xavier is heating his garage for motorcycles that don't even run. One doesn't run yet, I corrected. The other three are perfectly functional, and what does that matter? They're my motorcycles in my garage. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were arguing across the room. Some defended personal property rights. Others seemed genuinely concerned about energy waste. A few appeared to enjoy the drama. After 20 minutes of this, Brenda finally restored order. Clearly, this is a contentious issue. We'll table the amendment discussion for now and bring it to a full homeowner vote next month. In the meantime, Xavier, I'm asking you as a community member to voluntarily reduce your garage heating. No, I said simply, her face flushed. No, no. I'm using my property as I see fit within all legal boundaries. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're being selfish. I'm being an adult who pays my bills and minds my own business. You should try it. That got a few laughs from the crowd, which only made Brenda angrier. She dismissed the meeting shortly after, and people filed out into the cold night. Several neighbors stopped to talk to me on the way out. Jennifer approached with her husband. Sorry you're dealing with this. Brenda has been on a power trip lately. It's fine, I said. I just don't understand why she cares so much. Jennifer's husband, Tom, shook his head. She's always been controlling, but this winter has made it worse. I think she's worried people will start ignoring HOA rules if you get away with this. I'm not getting away with anything. I'm not breaking rules. I know, Tom said. But in Brenda's mind, if she can't control this, what else can't she control? That was an unsettling thought. Over the next week, things escalated. I started receiving daily letters from the HOA, each one more threatening than the last. They claimed I was in violation of vague community standards. They threatened fines. They suggested my behavior could result in suspension of my voting rights in HOA matters. I responded to each letter with a polite but firm reminder that I was not violating any actual rules. I also CC'd an attorney friend of mine in Chicago, just to show I was taking their threats seriously. On Saturday morning, I discovered someone had placed a pamphlet on every door in the neighborhood. The title read, Energy Conservation, a Community Responsibility. Inside was a thinly veiled attack on homeowners who prioritize personal comfort over community welfare. My address wasn't listed, but it was obvious who they meant. Marcus texted me a photo of the pamphlet. This is insane, I agreed. That afternoon, I was in my garage working on the Honda when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a man in his 50s I didn't recognize. Xavier Olsen. Yes, I'm Gary Thompson. I live over on Birch Street. What can I do for you? He looked embarrassed. I wanted to apologize for the HOA's behavior. I'm not on the board, but I've lived here for 12 years. This is ridiculous. You should be able to heat your garage. Thanks, I appreciate that. Brenda is convinced that if she doesn't crack down on you, the whole neighborhood will fall apart. But honestly, most people don't care. We've got better things to worry about. I wish she felt that way. Gary laughed. Not likely, but I wanted you to know you've got support. There are quite a few of us planning to vote against any covenant amendments that target energy use. That was encouraging. Thanks for letting me know. After Gary left, I went back to work on the motorcycle. The carburetor rebuild was nearly complete, and I was optimistic about getting the engine running soon. Working with my hands, solving mechanical problems, this was my therapy. I wasn't giving it up because Brenda Kensington had decided I was public enemy number one. Monday morning brought a new surprise. I walked outside to get my mail and found a news van parked across the street. A reporter and cameraman were filming my house. I walked over. Can I help you? The reporter, a polished woman in her 30s, smiled. Are you Xavier Olsen? I am. What's this about? I'm Vanessa Rodriguez from Channel 7 News. We received a tip about a heated garage controversy in this neighborhood. Would you be willing to give an interview, of course? Brenda had called the news. Sure, I said. What do you want to know? The cameraman started filming as Vanessa held up her microphone. Can you tell us about your heated garage? I explained the situation calmly and factually. I detailed my hobby, the temperature I maintained, my utility costs, and the HOA's response. Vanessa seemed genuinely interested, asking intelligent follow-up questions. And the HOA called the police, she asked. They did. The officers confirmed I wasn't breaking any laws and left. What do you say to neighbors who think you're being wasteful? I'd say I respect their opinion, but it's my property and my money. I'm not asking anyone else to pay for my hobby. I'm not violating any laws or legitimate HOA rules. People should be free to use their property as they wish within legal limits. After the interview, Vanessa asked if she could film the garage interior. I agreed. She and the cameraman spent 20 minutes getting footage of my workshop, the motorcycles, and the heating system. This will air on the 6 o'clock news, Vanessa said as they packed up. Thank you for your time. No problem. You might want to talk to the HOA president too, get both sides. Oh, we already did. That's how we heard about this story. I bet Brenda loved that. The news segment aired that evening. I watched it with Marcus at my place, beers in hand. The piece was surprisingly balanced. They showed my garage, interviewed me, and then cut to Brenda talking about community responsibility and energy conservation. But they also included a local attorney discussing property rights and HOA limitations. The attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Catherine Morrison, no relation to Patricia, explained that HOAs could only enforce rules explicitly stated in their covenants. Homeowners have broad rights to use their property as they see fit, Catherine said on camera. Unless there's a specific, clearly written rule prohibiting an action, the HOA generally can't restrict it. The segment ended with Vanessa noting that the controversy had divided the neighborhood and that a vote on potential covenant amendments was scheduled for next month. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text messages from neighbors, coworkers, even some friends from college who had seen the news. Most were supportive. A few thought I should just compromise to keep the peace, but the most interesting message came from Catherine Morrison, the attorney from the news segment. Saw your interview. If you need legal advice regarding the HOA, call me. First consultation free. I saved her number. The next morning, I found eggs splattered across my garage door. Someone had thrown at least a dozen eggs at it during the night. They had frozen solid in the sub-zero temperature, making cleanup difficult. I took photos, documented everything, and filed a police report. Officer Martinez came out to take my statement. Any idea who did this? He asked. Probably someone who saw the news and decided I'm the bad guy. We'll increase patrols in the area. Let me know if anything else happens. Something else did happen. 3 days later, someone slashed 2 of my car tires while it was parked in my driveway. Again, I filed a police report. Again, Officer Martinez took my statement. This is escalating, he noted. Tell me about it. Have you had direct threats from anyone? Just the HOA's letters, but those aren't violent threats, just legal ones. Keep copies of everything, and consider installing security cameras. I took his advice. That afternoon, I installed a Ring doorbell and 2 outdoor security cameras covering my driveway and garage. If someone was going to vandalize my property, I wanted evidence. The cameras paid off 2 nights later. At 1:15 in the morning, my phone alerted me to motion in my driveway. I pulled up the camera feed to see 2 figures approaching my garage with spray paint cans. I immediately called the police, then watched the feed as the figures started spray painting selfish and energy waster across my garage door in red paint. They were wearing dark clothes and had scarves covering their faces, but their body language and movements looked familiar. Police arrived within 7 minutes. The vandals were still there, admiring their handiwork. Officers Martinez and Chen detained them quickly. When they pulled down the scarves, I wasn't entirely surprised to see Patricia Morrison and Susan Wells from the HOA board. I went outside as the officers put them in handcuffs. Patricia was crying. Susan was defiant. "He deserved it," Susan yelled. "He's destroying our community by heating my garage," I asked calmly. "By being selfish, by not caring about anyone but yourself." Officer Chen put Susan in the back of a patrol car as Officer Martinez approached me. "We've got it on camera." I handed him my phone with the video pulled up. He watched it, nodded, and made some notes. "This is clear-cut vandalism. We'll be charging both of them." "What happens now?" "They'll be processed and released on bail, probably. You'll need to press charges." "I will." Patricia was sobbing as Officer Martinez guided her to the second patrol car that had arrived. "We were just trying to make a point. Xavier needs to understand how his actions affect others." "By committing crimes?" Officer Martinez asked. "That's not how this works, madam." As the police cars pulled away with Patricia and Susan inside, lights from nearby houses flicked on. Neighbors came out to see what was happening. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered in my driveway. Marcus arrived in his bathrobe. "What happened?" "Patricia and Susan spray painted my garage. Police caught them in the act." "Holy crap. This got way out of hand." "Yeah." By morning, the entire neighborhood knew about the arrests. My phone was blowing up with messages. Some people were shocked that HOA board members would resort to vandalism. Others seemed to think I had somehow provoked them. Brenda Kensington showed up at my door at 8 in the morning. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door, "about your board members vandalizing my property." Her face tightened. "That was unfortunate. Unfortunate. It's criminal." They were passionate about the issue. "Passion doesn't excuse breaking the law, Brenda, and neither does your vendetta against my heated garage." "This isn't a vendetta." "Then what do you call it?" "You called the police on me for nothing. You've sent me threatening letters. You've tried to turn the neighborhood against me. And now 2 of your board members are in jail for vandalism. At what point do you realize this has gone too far?" Brenda pulled her coat tighter. "I came here to ask you to drop the charges," I laughed. "You're serious?" "Patricia and Susan are good people. They made a mistake. There's no need to ruin their lives over this. They vandalized my property. They committed a crime. Because you pushed them to it." "I did nothing but heat my own garage with my own money. I didn't ask for any of this. You started this, Brenda. You and your obsession with controlling things that aren't your business. The HOA has every right to enforce community standards, not by breaking the law. And not by harassing homeowners who aren't doing anything wrong." We stared at each other in the cold morning air. Brenda's expression was a mixture of anger and something else. Desperation, maybe. "What is this really about?" I asked. "Why do you care so much about my garage heat?" "Because rules matter. Order matters. If I let you do whatever you want, everyone will think they can ignore the HOA. I'm not ignoring the HOA. I'm following every actual rule in the covenant. You're the one trying to invent new rules to punish me for something you personally don't like." "It's not personal." "It absolutely is. Admit it. This stopped being about energy conservation the moment I refused to do what you wanted." Brenda's mouth opened and closed. Finally, she said, "The HOA board will be discussing your continued behavior at our next meeting." There it is. My continued behavior. The behavior of owning property and using it legally. Let me save you some time, Brenda. I'm not turning off my garage heat. I'm not stopping my hobby. And I'm not dropping the charges against Patricia and Susan. They committed a crime. They can face the consequences. You'll regret this. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The HOA will make your life here very difficult. Document that threat, I said. I'm recording this conversation on my doorbell camera. If you continue to harass me, I'll add you to the police report. Brenda looked up at the camera, her face going pale. She turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it. This was insane. All of this over a heated garage. Later that day, I called Catherine Morrison, the attorney from the news segment. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon at her office in downtown Minneapolis. Catherine's office was on the 23rd floor of a modern glass building. Her reception area was professional and understated. She greeted me personally and led me to a conference room with a view of the city. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice," I said. "Of course. I saw the news report about the vandalism. 2 HOA board members arrested for spray painting your garage. That's quite an escalation. It's been a nightmare. Tell me everything from the beginning." I spent 45 minutes walking her through the entire saga. The initial police call, the HOA meeting, the letters, the vandalism, and Brenda's visit that morning. Catherine took notes throughout. When I finished, she sat back and tapped her pen against her notepad. "You have an excellent case for harassment," she said, "both against the HOA as an organization and against Brenda Kensington personally. I don't want to sue anyone. I just want to be left alone. I understand, but you need to be prepared. Based on what you've told me, Brenda isn't going to stop. She's threatened to make your life difficult. That's actionable. What would you recommend? First, continue documenting everything. Every letter, every interaction, every threat. Second, send a cease and desist letter to the HOA board. I can draft that for you. It will put them on notice that their behavior constitutes harassment and that you're prepared to take legal action if it continues. What about the vandalism charges? Definitely pursue those. Patricia and Susan need to face consequences for their actions. It might also send a message to other HOA members that this isn't acceptable behavior. And the covenant amendment they want to pass, Catherine smiled. That's the interesting part. Even if they pass an amendment restricting garage heating, they can't enforce it retroactively against you. You started heating your garage before any such rule existed. They'd have to grandfather you in. Really? Really? Retroactive enforcement of new HOA rules is legally murky at best and often unenforceable. You have a strong argument that you relied on the existing covenant when you installed your heating system. That was a relief. There's something else, Catherine said. If the HOA continues to harass you after receiving a cease and desist letter, you can sue for damages. Emotional distress, loss of property value due to harassment, legal fees. The HOA has liability insurance, so they'd likely settle rather than go to trial. I don't care about money. I just want them to leave me alone. Then the cease and desist should accomplish that. Most HOA boards back down when they realize they're facing actual legal consequences. I hired Catherine on the spot. She drafted the cease and desist letter that afternoon. It was thorough and professional, laying out every instance of harassment, the vandalism by board members, and Brenda's threatening statements. It concluded with a clear warning that any further harassment would result in immediate legal action. Catherine sent the letter via certified mail to the HOA board and to Brenda personally. We'd know within a few days if they received it. In the meantime, life continued. Patricia and Susan were formally charged with criminal mischief and vandalism. Their bail was set at $5,000 each, which they both posted immediately. The local news covered the story, which brought more attention to the heated garage controversy. Public opinion seemed to shift in my favor. The vandalism made the HOA look unhinged. Online comments on the news articles were mostly supportive of my right to heat my garage. A few people still thought I was wasteful, but even they agreed that vandalism was wrong. The HOA called an emergency meeting for the following Saturday. I wasn't planning to attend, but Marcus convinced me it would look bad if I didn't show up. "They'll paint you as hiding," he said. Better to face them head-on. He was probably right. Saturday afternoon, I walked to the community center again. The parking lot was even more crowded than last time. News vans from 3 different stations were parked along the street. This had become a real story. Inside, every seat was taken. People stood along the walls. I spotted Vanessa Rodriguez from Channel 7 and reporters from other stations set up with cameras. The HOA had gone from a neighborhood issue to a media circus. Brenda sat at the front table with Donald and Rachel. Patricia and Susan's seats were conspicuously empty. Brenda looked exhausted, her normally perfect hair slightly disheveled. She called the meeting to order at exactly 2 o'clock. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to discuss recent events and the future direction of our community." "Where are Patricia and Susan?" someone called out. "They've resigned from the board effective immediately," Brenda said stiffly. "We'll be holding elections to fill their positions next month." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. Brenda continued, "I want to address the vandalism incident. The board does not condone criminal behavior of any kind. Patricia and Susan acted as individuals, not as representatives of the HOA. But they vandalized Xavier's property because of HOA business," Jennifer said from the front row. "You can't separate the two." "Their actions were their own," Brenda insisted. I raised my hand. Brenda reluctantly acknowledged me. "Did you receive the cease and desist letter from my attorney?" I asked. The room went silent. Cameras swiveled toward Brenda, her face flushed. "I did. And I've reviewed it with the HOA's legal counsel. The board will be discussing our response in executive session." "Let me save you the trouble," I said. "I want to be left alone. I'm not breaking any rules. I'm not harming anyone. I'm just living in my house and pursuing my hobbies. If the HOA stops harassing me, we have no problem. The board has legitimate concerns about energy consumption in this community," Brenda said. "Then address those concerns through proper channels. Draft a reasonable covenant amendment and put it to a vote. But don't target individual homeowners who aren't breaking existing rules. And definitely don't send board members to vandalize their property." Someone started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, a significant portion of the room was applauding. Brenda's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Order," she banged her gavel. "This is not a forum for personal disputes." "You made it personal," I said. "I didn't ask for any of this. You called the police on me. You sent threatening letters. You tried to turn my neighbors against me. And when that didn't work, your board members committed crimes. This is entirely on you." Gary Thompson stood up from the middle of the room. "I think Xavier's right. The board has overstepped. I move that we suspend any discussion of energy-related covenant amendments for 6 months and conduct a proper review of what restrictions are actually necessary and legal." "I second that motion," Tom said. Brenda looked panicked. "The board needs to consider this carefully." "Then put it to a vote," Gary said. "That's how HOAs are supposed to work. The members vote." Brenda looked at Rachel, who shrugged. "They can call for a vote on anything at a general meeting. It's in the bylaws." "Fine," Brenda said through gritted teeth. "All in favor of suspending energy amendment discussions for 6 months. The majority of hands went up. It wasn't even close. Opposed? Maybe 10 hands, including Brenda's. "Motion passes," Rachel said, typing on her laptop. Brenda looked defeated. The meeting continued for another hour, covering other routine HOA business. Nobody seemed interested. The energy controversy had been the main attraction. As people filed out after the meeting, several neighbors approached me. Most offered support and apologized for the HOA's behavior. A few, like Mrs. Patterson, gave me dirty looks but said nothing. Vanessa Rodriguez caught me in the parking lot. Can I get a quick comment? Sure. How do you feel about the vote today? Relieved. I hope this means we can all move forward and focus on actual community issues instead of manufactured controversies. You think this will be the end of it? I hope so, but I'm prepared if it's not. That evening, Marcus came over with pizza and beer. We watched the news coverage together. All three local stations covered the meeting. The narrative had clearly shifted. The HOA was now portrayed as overreaching and intrusive. I was the everyman defending property rights. You've become a folk hero, Marcus joked. I just want to work on my motorcycles in peace. Well, after today, you might get that wish. Brenda looked pretty beaten down. He was right. The fight seemed to have gone out of her during that meeting, but I was wrong to think it was over. Monday morning, I received a notice that the HOA was filing a lawsuit against me for flagrant disregard of community standards and willful creation of hostile living environment. I immediately forwarded the notice to Catherine. She called me within an hour. This is absurd. They have no grounds for this lawsuit. Can they just sue me for nothing? Technically, anyone can sue anyone for anything. But this won't survive a motion to dismiss. They're claiming you created a hostile living environment, but they're the ones who harassed you, vandalized your property, and turned the neighborhood into a circus. So what do? We file a countersuit. Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, abuse of process. We'll bury them in discovery requests and make this as expensive as possible for their insurance company. They'll drop their suit and settle ours. How long will this take? Could be months, but we'll get a motion to dismiss their suit within a few weeks. Once a judge sees the facts, this will get tossed. Catherine was right. 6 weeks later, we appeared before Judge Harold Matthews in Hennepin County District Court. The HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Peter Walsh, tried to argue that I had undermined community cohesion and ignored reasonable requests to modify my behavior. Judge Matthews wasn't buying it. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Counselor," he interrupted Peter mid-argument, "you're asking me to enforce HOA rules that don't exist in the covenant. Is that correct?" Peter stammered. "We're asking the court to recognize that implied standards of community behavior should be enforceable." "Implied standards," Judge Matthews repeated flatly. "Show me where in the HOA covenant it restricts garage heating. It doesn't explicitly say, then you have no case. Motion to dismiss granted. And frankly, Mr. Walsh, you should have advised your clients not to file this in the first place." This was a waste of the court's time. Peter sat down, defeated. Catherine stood. "Your Honor, we have a counterclaim for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Judge Matthews nodded. "I read your filing, Miss Morrison. The facts are disturbing. HOA board members vandalized your client's property. The HOA president made threats. This goes well beyond a simple dispute over rules." He turned to Peter. "I strongly suggest your client settle this matter quickly. If it goes to trial, the plaintiff will almost certainly prevail, and the damages could be substantial." The hearing ended with the HOA's lawsuit dismissed and my countersuit moving forward. Peter Walsh looked like he wanted to disappear. Outside the courtroom, Catherine was pleased. "That went as well as it could have. They'll settle now. No way they want this going to trial. How much should I ask for? Your actual damages are minimal. The spray paint cleanup, the tire replacement, your legal fees so far, maybe $10,000 total. But we can ask for emotional distress damages too. I'd say we start negotiations at $75,000 and settle for 30 to 40. That seems high. You were harassed for months, vandalized, threatened, and sued frivolously. You deserve compensation." And more importantly, it sends a message to the HOA that this behavior has consequences. 2 weeks later, the HOA's insurance company offered $50,000 to settle. Catherine recommended accepting it. "It's more than I expected them to offer," she said. "And it includes a clause requiring the HOA to leave you alone permanently. Any further harassment voids the settlement and restarts the lawsuit." I accepted the offer. The settlement also required the HOA to issue a formal apology to be included in the next community newsletter. Brenda must have hated writing it, but it appeared in the March newsletter. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA board extends its sincerest apologies to Xavier Olsen for the inappropriate response to his use of garage heating. The board acknowledges that Mr. Olsen was at all times acting within his rights as a property owner, and that the HOA's actions were unwarranted. We commit to better communication and respect for homeowner rights going forward. It was satisfying to read, even if I knew it was written by attorneys. Life slowly returned to normal. Patricia and Susan pleaded guilty to misdemeanor vandalism charges. They each received probation, community service, and were ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my garage. Their mugshots had appeared in the local news, and both had reportedly become somewhat reclusive in the neighborhood. Brenda remained as HOA president, but her authority had been significantly diminished. The contentious election to fill the 2 vacant board positions resulted in 2 new members who were explicitly pro-property rights and anti-overreach. Future HOA meetings were far less dramatic. My heated garage remained at 55 degrees through the rest of that brutal winter. I finished the restoration on the 1972 Honda CB 750 in late March. It was beautiful. Cherry red tank, gleaming chrome, purring engine. I took it for its first ride on a sunny April day when the temperature finally climbed above 50 degrees. Marcus rode along on his Harley. We cruised through the Minnesota countryside, enjoying the freedom of the open road. No HOA meetings, no drama, just the simple pleasure of riding a motorcycle I had restored with my own hands in my heated garage. That summer, I started a motorcycle club for enthusiasts in the area. We met once a month, rotating between members' homes and garages. About 15 people became regular members. Ironically, 3 of them lived in Meadowbrook Estates, including Gary Thompson and Tom from down the street. Brenda still lived across the neighborhood from me, but we rarely interacted. When we did pass each other, she avoided eye contact. The transformation from aggressive HOA president to quiet neighbor was remarkable. In September, there was another HOA election. Brenda didn't run for re-election. Rachel Turner, the secretary who always seemed uncomfortable with the board's previous tactics, became the new president. Her platform was simple: maintain common areas, enforce legitimate rules, and respect homeowner rights. She won easily. At the October general meeting, Rachel proposed amending the covenant to explicitly protect homeowner rights to reasonable property use. The amendment passed with over 80% approval. It included specific language protecting garage heating, workshop use, and hobby-related property modifications, as long as they met building codes and didn't create safety hazards. I want to thank Xavier Olsen for his patience during last winter's controversy, Rachel said during the meeting. His situation taught us important lessons about respecting individual rights while maintaining community standards. This amendment ensures we don't repeat those mistakes. People applauded. It felt like closure. A year after the initial incident, I was featured in a national news article about HOA overreach. The reporter interviewed me in my garage, now home to 5 vintage motorcycles in various states of restoration. The piece discussed property rights, the growth of HOAs in America, and the importance of reasonable governance. The article quoted Catherine Morrison. The Olsen case is a textbook example of what happens when HOAs forget they serve the homeowners, not the other way around. Xavier simply wanted to pursue his hobby in his own garage. The fact that it became a legal battle shows how far HOA culture has strayed from its original purpose. The settlement money went toward more tools for my workshop and a down payment on a 1969 Triumph Bonneville that needed extensive restoration work. My garage remained heated to 55 degrees every winter. Nobody complained. Brenda eventually moved away. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband relocated to Arizona, possibly to escape the Minnesota winters or the notoriety from the garage controversy. Maybe both. Patricia and Susan stayed in the neighborhood but kept low profiles. I saw Patricia once at the grocery store. She avoided my aisle. Susan moved about 6 months after the court case settled. My relationship with most neighbors improved significantly. The controversy had forced people to think about what kind of community they wanted to live in. Most chose one based on mutual respect rather than rigid control. I continued working from home, coding during the day and restoring motorcycles in the evening. My heated garage became something of a neighborhood gathering spot. Other hobby enthusiasts would stop by to see what I was working on. I taught a few neighbors basic motorcycle maintenance. The following winter was even colder than the previous one. My garage stayed warm. My workshop stayed functional. I finished 2 more motorcycle restorations. And most importantly, I lived my life on my own terms, in my own home, without interference from an overreaching HOA. The whole experience taught me important lessons about standing up for your rights, the value of good legal counsel, and the danger of letting small amounts of power go to people's heads. It also showed me that most people, when given the chance to think about issues rather than being whipped into artificial outrage, will choose reason over reaction. Every time I walk into my warm garage on a cold winter evening, turn on the lights, and get to work on whatever motorcycle project is on my bench, I'm grateful I didn't back down. I'm grateful I didn't let Brenda Kensington and her misguided HOA board dictate how I lived my life. Property rights matter. Personal freedom matters. And sometimes you have to fight for both, even over something as simple as a heated garage. The fight was worth it, not just for me, but for every homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates who now lives with a little more freedom and a little less fear of arbitrary HOA enforcement. As I write this, it's another cold January evening in Minneapolis. My garage is a comfortable 55 degrees. I'm working on a 1970 Honda CB 350 that I found in rough shape at an estate sale. It needs new rings, the carbs rebuilt, and the electrical system sorted out. But it'll be beautiful when it's done. Outside, the temperature has dropped to -15 degrees. Snow is falling steadily. My neighbors are in their homes, warm and safe. Nobody is worried about my garage heat. Nobody is calling the police or filing lawsuits or vandalizing my property. Life is good. The HOA still exists, of course. It maintains the common areas, organizes the annual summer picnic, and handles the boring administrative tasks that keep a neighborhood functioning. But it stays in its lane now. It doesn't try to control things beyond its legitimate authority. That's how it should be. That's how it should have been from the beginning. My doorbell rang while I was tightening the head bolts on the Honda. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and went to see who it was. Marcus stood there with a 6-pack of beer and a grin. "Heard you're working on a new bike. Came to help. Come on in." "I've got the engine torn down." We spent the next 3 hours in the garage, working on the motorcycle, drinking beer, and talking about everything except HOAs. It was perfect. This was why I heated my garage. This was what it was all about: freedom, friendship, the simple pleasure of working with your hands on something you care about. No amount of HOA rules or community standards or energy conservation lectures could take that away from me. I had fought for my right to this small piece of happiness, and I had won. Outside, the Minnesota winter raged on. Inside my heated garage, surrounded by motorcycles and tools and the smell of oil and metal, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, living life on my own terms. And that, ultimately, was what the whole fight had been about. Not energy consumption or community values or HOA authority. It was about my right to live my life in my home, pursuing my passions, without unwarranted interference. I had that right. I had defended that right, and I would never let anyone take it away again. The heated garage controversy had ended exactly as it should have ended, with the busybody HOA members facing consequences for their illegal behavior, with reasonable governance replacing petty tyranny, and with one homeowner successfully standing up for his rights against an organization that had forgotten its place. My garage remains heated to this day. The motorcycles keep coming. The restorations continue. And life in Meadowbrook Estates goes on, a little freer and a lot saner than it was during those chaotic winter months when the HOA called the police on my heated garage.